Now, there are many varied ways to describe leftists these days, but happy is seldom one of them. Most of the time they are irascible, sanctimonious, angry, confused, hypocritical, and often just a little bit psychologically unhinged. It would be unkind to forget this is not entirely their fault. The breakdown of the family unit during the past few decades has robbed many of them of a secure, comforting and disciplined environment in which to grow up. As President Barack Obama admitted in his famous Father's Day speech in 2008, kids who grow up in fatherless homes are 9 times more likely to drop out of school and 20 times more likely to end up in prison. To which I'd add, they are 100 times more likely to seek consolation for their insecurities and teenage angst in fringe identity groups and meaningless undergraduate courses that will only permanently inhibit their ability to become functioning adults. The education system too has bombarded them with an overwhelming pessimism about the future of life on Earth, instead of training them to develop ways of rationally responding to life's inevitable challenges. Their only coping mechanism then is emotion, by which I mean anger, which is often expressed with threats of violence and murder. My next guest says that leftist fury is so ferocious these days that it is indistinguishable from that of Islamic terrorists, one of who allegedly tried to murder British author Salman Rushdie in New York on the weekend. And worse, given that so many of them call themselves feminists, their targets are often women. British author J.K. Rowling has copped more of it than most. Here's a compilation of threats made to Rowling for daring to be sceptical about transgenderism. They're anything but charming. These threats cannot be ignored since Rowling's address was published and shared online by the people who clearly wish her dead. These threats did not trigger the same response from Twitter that occurs when people post comments criticising lockdowns or leftist groups like Black Lives Matter, all of which seems to contribute to the ever-worsening cycle of unhappiness and mental disorders. Let's bring in Alexandra Marshall, who also knows a thing or two about these kind of threats. Alexandra, welcome to the show.
It is an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Now, let's first talk about your first job online. You moderated a chat group for teenage girls back in the 1990s. What was that like, and did it differ from what you see online these days?
Okay, so I was basically a fandom queen, and I wasn't just moderating various chat communities online, I was a teenage girl. So it was a self-moderated environment where we were producing artistic content and writing and making videos, but also the girls were obsessed with boys on these TV shows, as you expect. And so they'd have these huge wars every afternoon, and you'd wake up and there'd be bits of teenage girl everywhere, and then they'd get over it. Now we're seeing a more vicious cycle, I think, with a lot more nastiness arising in social media than what we used to have. I mean, before it was kind of fun, and now it's sinister.
Well, if it's getting worse, what do you think is driving it?
So I think the basic concept has changed to what we expect out of society. So what society values is what we instill in our children. So when I was growing up, the online community was about creativity and about sharing a love of something that we were trying to support. And now we value victimhood, we value terror, we value alarmism, and this is what our kids are reflecting when they're online. They get kudos and likes and social engagement from either pretending to be victims or for monetizing fear. And it's no surprise that it has worn off on the section of society. It started with things like trigger warnings on Tumblr, and it's spread out into the mainstream education system, and it has thoroughly ruined an entire generation of children.